Hello and welcome to My Security TV and our Tech and Sec Weekly. My name's Chris Cubbage. I'm the Executive Editor with My Security Media, and today we're joined by Jason Baden, Regional Vice President for Australia and New Zealand with F5, looking at multi-cloud protection of a digital world. We've kept the topic broad. We're going to have a sort of broad discussion on cybersecurity and F5's observations in the sector, and no one better than Jason Baden, Regional Vice President with F5. Jason, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me.
Great. Now, F5, most of us will know F5 in terms of that sort of multi-cloud environment sort of stack, maybe in terms of a buzzword for you. But maybe introduce us to F5 and where you had your agility conference just recently as well. So you had a range of announcements coming out.
Sure. No, thank you. Thanks, Chris. F5's been around for 26 years. It seems like only yesterday, but we've got wide-ranging engagements with lots of customers around the world, but also around Australia and New Zealand. The majority of our engagements are with, government, with banking and finance, with telecommunications. And so we have a really good understanding about what's happening in the market, how that's working, and seeing some of those trends through that.
It's really important because maybe the correct term as you use it is distributed cloud services, but it does cover everything. And I love the acronyms here in terms of the WAAP, so the Web Application API Protection, and you got the WAFs in terms of web application firewalls as well. So, and that's often where I think that's the thing when you've been around for 26 years, you do get kind of pigeonholed into certain areas, but you are expanding
Absolutely.
the service offering and what you're doing because the market is moving to multi-cloud.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I think the positioning for us has been is that we were very much a traditional data center service. So we provided hardware, we provided load balancing into customers. As that's grown and evolved, and especially over the last 3 years, we've seen some really big trends around digitalization. And because we've always supported the application, that has meant that wherever that application goes, F5 goes with it. So where we've seen that is that traditionally, absolutely, and we still have plenty of customers that are very happy to buy tin, put that in their data center, see where that works. But as we've seen over the last few years, there's been a huge acceleration, especially in ANZ, around moving into clouds, moving into a single cloud, moving into a multi-cloud, having a hybrid cloud offering. And so wherever that application goes, you need to be able to not only understand what's happening with it, but also secure it and make sure that's got that coverage. So definitely terms like, web application, WAAP, these new areas, is that those places where that's basically making sure that there's security around that application wherever it is.
How much configuration is required in that as well? Because one of the things I was going to raise is you're seeing up to 3.4, well, the stats here is 3.4 public clouds and 3.9 private clouds have been deployed and tested. Do you think the market is still playing around as to what they're doing, where they're going? They're not sure. And then I was going to say the platform that you provide, there's still configuration required, or are you providing a bit of automation in there as well? How much are you really working with the clients in this regard?
Chris, that's a great question. So we can really unpack that. Firstly, I'll say all of the above. Really, what we see from that is that customers come to us and say, actually, we want to do that all of ourselves. We've got the skill sets, we've got the people. And if you think about a tier one bank, they've got a lot of developers, they've got a lot of cybersecurity professionals. There's a huge amount of coverage around that. And so that's quite easy for you to be able to say, okay, well, I can take that, I can configure it, I can manage it, I can understand what's happening on a daily basis. What we've seen is that the application is now the long tail. Is that we see that going into every part of an organization. And so as you may not have as many people, you don't have as many developers, that may mean that you need to outsource more of that. And so what we've done is we've evolved through that, and where we're very traditionally delivering those services, now what we do is that we deliver in cloud, so you can purchase that through a marketplace within any of the cloud providers. You can then also outsource it to us, because we have points of presence all around the world that allows you then to go into those points of presence, and then we will manage that for you as well and bring that back. And I think that comes back to that skill shortage that we're seeing in cybersecurity. I think even I read an article the other day that there's 25,000 open jobs in cybersecurity right now. So really, what do you need to do? You need to automate more, you need to outsource more, you need to go to somebody that you can trust to do that.
And you raised it sort of pre-interview. You was going to raise the skills shortage. We might sort of jump on that too, because it sort of maybe brings us back to the federal budget and their SME sort of tax concessions as well. There's a lot of discussion around cybersecurity and the onus on business to uplift their cybersecurity is there, but at the same time, the industry's got a skills shortage as well, and the digital transformation. It's a perfect storm in regards. What's your general observations, and maybe starting with the skills shortage? Can we meet things like a tax concession where effectively the government's increasing demand potentially?
At the same time, I think that they're doing the right thing. Is that there is just if we talk about the skills shortage, as I said, there's probably 25,000 open roles at the moment in cybersecurity. What do we need to do? We need to encourage people to go into that. We need to be able to find more new talent to pick cybersecurity up as a interest area early on. And I think we're seeing even the competition for talent at universities is that many of them are being offered jobs in first and second year if they're able to complete their course, and they're a real hunting ground from there. There's really a question is, should we be going back even further and convincing high schools to pick that up as a subject as well? So I think there's a long road to go on being able to get that skills up to speed. But while we're doing that, what we're seeing is that there's more and more attacks, and as you alluded to, the federal government has come out and said that they want to encourage people. I think if you use the analogy that if a burglar is coming into your street and they see security cameras and barbed wire and a big fence, and next door they don't see one, they're going to go to the house next door. And what we're seeing is that potentially the large organisations have a security budget. They've been very well versed in it. They've been spending money in that for a really long time. Where we're now seeing is that those SMEs, and so the government's initiative to say if you have less than 50,000 up to 50,000, 50 million turnover, then what they're offering is for you to be able to spend that money on cybersecurity. And so if you spend $100,000 on cybersecurity, you've got a $120,000 deduction. Yep. So what that's really saying is that the government's seeing that those skill sets are not there, and so therefore if they can find a way to be able to do that, and that's the perfect place for something like a managed service, or where you outsource or give that configuration to a provider like us to be able to help out with that.
And that was for digital capability, which includes spending on websites, cloud computing, and portable payment devices. We're going to touch a little bit on sort of the bots and the botnets as well, and maybe let's touch on payment devices with Visa as well. But the general package from the federal government and sort of the uplift, there was 39% of Australian enterprises have adopted multi-cloud technologies, and given most of the Australian sort of business environment is small and medium-sized enterprises, where's the real challenges for them? Is it the amount of cloud offerings and sort of the technology challenge? How do they choose? How do they get those skill sets? And then the security challenge that comes up behind that. Where do you think the key pain points are for business here?
Chris, I think the area that has really driven that is that Australia is a very early adopter of cloud architecture. So leveraging those hyperscalers to be able to put applications into it. And it really comes back to that application layer. So as you said, where are you going to put that application? You're going to put it where you can get the most access to it, that it's going to be able to scale. You're going to be able to, it's going to work when you need it to work. And you think about an insurance company during this, the recent flooding is that they may have times where there's no disaster or there's nothing happening, and their website or applications might not be used all that much. But when you have something like that, where you've got a mass amount of people trying to log on or, speak to somebody or get access to that, there's going to be a huge amount of scale that often you can't even be ready for. So hence the reason that's when you want to be able to use a hyperscaler, a cloud computing. At that same time, if there's money associated with it or there's potential to fraud, that's exactly where criminals are going to go. So what do you want to do around that? You want to make sure that that application can scale, but at the same time, it's also secure. And so those are probably the two things that are coupled together on that side of it. We're seeing that applications can be moved between clouds, and that can often be either for a specific use case where the cloud provider might do something special compared to another one, or it might be wanting to be using it as before, where they want increased scale really quickly. But the other reason might be is you might look at it from a cost base, and then you take back ownership of where are your applications. And we've seen on as Australia is sometimes further ahead than some of the other regions that we work with at F5 across the world, is that we might see where customers have gone all in on certain cloud providers, gone through that process, looked at where are those applications going, and then maybe scaled that back, brought some things back on site, may have worked with other cloud providers. And so really from our perspective, it's about where is that application and how can we help you manage it and secure it as best as we can.
Nice. So really, that's where business would be focusing on, first on the application. What's the front line of the business and their shop front, I suppose, and then being able to scale and move it around. I imagine that's another sort of challenge here, is being able to move from one cloud environment to another, or operate in different cloud environments potentially simultaneously. Does that complexity create the security risk, the configuration of that, or maybe that's what F5 focuses on, is wrapping the security around the application, so it doesn't really matter what environment it's in?
That's it. It's just to allow wherever that application is sitting to absolutely be secure. But if you do want to move it quickly, or you do need, have a need for it to be in a different place, that that you've got that uniform security across all of those platforms. That can often add that complexity, where we've seen customers as they build out a new application, or they have a new development that they're working on, is that now what we see is the security architect is in there from day one. And the reason that they're in there is that they can, what do we know devs love doing? They don't like to be slowed down. They don't want to have anybody hold them back. They want to, move really, really quickly and get that application out. While security isn't a slowdown, it is a consideration. And the sooner you put it in there, the easier that application will slide through into production.
And that's your WAP sort of tool there, that web application API protection. That's really where that focuses in on, right?
Absolutely. So hence the reason that you can have that application wherever you need it to be, and you can have that covered. And I think that's the evolution of F5 as well. Is that very traditional in the hardware space, but over the last 3 years we've invested heavily in new acquisitions around the cloud and software, but also into this distributed cloud. And that's allowed us to have those points of presence all over the world to be able to deliver that to customers. So really, wherever that application can go, I think we're in a very fortunate position that we're a trusted advisor within those customers. They can now take those policies with them wherever that application is.
Nice. That's the F5 distributed cloud platform. So it's worth having a look at. Let's have a discussion on the payment risks and what Visa's doing. And also wanted to cover off on bot mitigation too. So bots are running crazy, as they always have been. But where would you like to start? Payments? So I suppose let's start with the money.
And again, it comes back to wherever there's money, there's criminals. So exactly right. if there is a payment opportunity, people will find their ways around. There's some very good tools out there. There's some that are used, but what you really want to do from a engagement, and the way we see this working with our customer base is that you can have things where you've got capture, where you count how many fire hydrants you've seen in there, but that can also be a hindrance to that customer interaction, or that that consumer interaction. So whether you're a government department or a commerce site, anything that slows down that engagement can have an impact. People might be not bothered with it. You have to do it 3 times. You can't read that writing. It makes it more difficult. What we do at F5 is we want to be able to take that away from it, so it's seamless. So that interaction and discovering whether that's a bot or that's a real person can be done quite easily in the background, and make that seamless. So it makes that interaction with that application so much easier if you don't have to, do those extra steps to go through that. Now,
what are you doing? Is this down into potential behavioural analytics, or what's the secret sauce?
AI and reviewing that, and then capturing that data, and then building that out so that if we do see something, that every customer is benefits from that, the value of capturing a new bot or a new way that someone is trying to get through through an application.
We have done a lot in sort of fraud detection, fraud prevention, and you're right. Sometimes the business case for reducing the fraud prevention to make sure that there's no sort of friction for the customer, for those legitimate customers. And that's where you're working on. Are you matching sort of the device, how many times that device accesses the application, and sort of building what we would know as sort of know your customer and trusted customers and trusted devices?
Correct, and being able to make sure that that's a real person on the end of it. I think the other area you touched on there is that's one part of it. The other places that we see with the owner of the application is often that can have a downstream impact on their bottom line. Is that we've seen where if there's constant bots hitting your system, an example is in ticketing. So if there's somebody or hotel reservations, if you're going through that process and continually keep looking at that, that can have an onward cost of looking up if there is an actual room there that may never actually be used, but have a cost to that provider. So they want to do everything they possibly can to make sure that the person that's looking up or working through that, looking for the hotel room or the flight is actually the person that's going to book it, as opposed to a computer just kind of brute forcing through their systems.
Well, we've got some stats here. Card not present fraud, according to the Australian Payments Network, rose over 12% in financial year 21 to a tune of 442 million. So it's a big business in that regards. And the adaptive applications vision, I take it that all this is, it's all interdependent really, isn't it? You do one and affects the other. So bot detection, bot prevention increases your fraud sort of prevention as well, and improves your payment processing and customer engagement. So this is really the front line for business today in cybersecurity. What other observations have you got for business? And I'm looking here at adaptive applications vision and the portfolio. Where would a business owner or manager be thinking in this regard if they're running an online or an e-commerce sort of site? And they might want to adapt their applications to a new cloud environment. Where are they going to be thinking about, and where would they start at the application point?
Yeah, I think going back to the previous comments, Chris, is it's really about baking that security in as you're building out that application. I think COVID and the pandemic has meant that we look to applications as our lifeblood. How do we get in? How do we interact with an organisation? How do we interact with a government department? How do we talk to anybody now? It's often through an application. And so that engagement is our first point of call. It's about how quickly can somebody who's building an application make sure that interaction is easy, that it's secure, and they can make sure that they've got the person that they think they're talking to on the end of the line. Because as you said, I think you called out the dollars that are impacted by the business. Often just going through this process at the start can mean saving a lot of money at the end. And so often this return on investment for going through this process is greatly saved many times over.
And I think the other thing is the customer's expectations is also changing, and they expect it to be seamless and secure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know about you, but COVID has hit our house, and we did 7 days of lockdown, and I know that we placed an order for groceries, and it was within half an hour it had been delivered. I mean, you think about that 2 years ago, it's impossible to imagine that level of service now is available to us, and we're not going to go back. We expect, probably expect that timeline's going to get shorter rather than longer. And what we really do is that therefore then creates the complexity, but also means that it puts the organisations on the hook to make sure that that's a secure engagement.
Well, look, we've covered a fair bit. What's your general observations of the industry, maybe from the cybersecurity sector that you're observing? We touched on the sort of skill shortage, but what's your general observations for here in Australia and New Zealand?
Look, Chris, I think what we're seeing is that there's broad brush, as we said. We talked about how are we going to maintain the people to do these. The cybersecurity, the cyber attacks are getting cheaper to do but more expensive to cover. So we have to find ways to automate those. And I think that's really the big place, is that we've got many, they're getting much more sophisticated. the attacks, they're getting much easier to do. You can download them from the dark web. There's quite easy places to be able to find those areas. So it's really having that plan up front. And then really lastly, I think it's just about digitization, and we're just going to see more and more of those organizations that potentially didn't think of themselves as being going into the digital world, having an application and being able to deliver on that.
So it's really through the MSPs, the MSSPs, that's where the cybersecurity sector is going now, because it's very complex. And we talked about how business is transforming, but the adversaries are transforming as well. So they're adapting. It's an endless game. We've always been aware of that, but I don't know whether normal business owners and operators are aware of how sophisticated this is becoming. So you really do need sort of managed service providers in the middle who know what they're doing.
You are 100% correct, Chris. We're seeing our partners really engaging in that. Is that they're taking those services and they're aggregating those security services to then take them to their customers. So it is that there is definitely the middle ground of where can you support and where are you going to be able to find the people to be able to do that. So definitely it's a circle.
Great. So Jason Baden, thank you so much for that. It's always good, particularly when you're a sort of a regional VP, you have a broad sort of cover across the country, but obviously you talk to your counterparts at F5 around the world as well. So it's always good to get that insights into the sector. So Jason Baden, Regional Vice President for Australia and New Zealand with F5. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Chris.
Cheers.